Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. As you can tell from the title up there, we're now on episode 8 of season 6. It's supposed to be fun. This is another Lou Schneider episode, and as I mentioned at the end of the previous episode, it marks the return of Ray's one-time nemesis from season 2, who it was mainly the end of that episode where he was a nemesis. He was mainly an antagonist for Deborah through most of it, of course. The Dan Castanen... I always butcher his name, but Brian. It's the return of Brian. Before I get too far into it, just a reminder, if you want to support the channel, both the Patreon and PayPal links are down below. If you want to do a one-off support or a one-off request, go the PayPal route. If you want to continuously support the channel and gain access to perks such as early access for videos and being able to request videos such as reviews of films like Captain Ron, go the Patreon route. Either way, your continued support is appreciated, even if all you're doing is just watching the videos repeatedly, like I know a lot of you constant watchers for this Raymond series are. Now, this episode, Dan Castellaneta, if I actually spelled it right in my notes. If you guys don't remember who that is, it's the voice of Homer Simpson amongst other characters. So, him playing Ray and Deborah's nemesis, Brian. Who the last time we saw him, he was the coach for T-ball. Now he's gone to basketball. And I'll say he's just as annoying here, but he's toned down a little bit because we only have a couple moments for him, and they're brief. Now, this episode is the family watching Michael and Geoffrey play basketball. And this is another instance where these twins are identical, but Michael and Geoffrey play the game differently. Geoffrey really is into the game, playing it, but Michael, he's bored and he just wants to have fun. Now, you've heard me posit that there is a possibility that, not intentionally, but with how the writers wrote Ray back and forth along with the conventions of sitcoms, he might be a little ADHD. Now, looking at Michael, there's the possibility, especially in this episode, that he might be a little bit too. Now, that's also probably not intentional, just from the way how they wrote him. Because it's the way that seeing Michael play it, as I'm watching, some of my memories from childhood were coming in, and mainly the one time I was in sports as a youth before I got into middle school and became an adolescent. And that's when I played soccer, which, in case you're wondering, I'm looking for, see if my trophies are within range here, but I think I might have put them outside or somewhere else. But, well, I guess I put them outside. Well, anyway, the trophies we got for that. One was for participation, which of course shows that the participation trophy thing has been around for a while, at least since the early 90s, so it's not a new phenomena. But I also got most improved rookie for the team, so there's that. Now, I wasn't as trying to think of a nice way to say this for old Michael on the show. I wasn't as eccentric when it came to playing the game. I would actually hyper focus on it. But watching him, like, yeah, some brief memories that were coming in, like, yeah, uncomfortable like that. The only difference is I had supportive parents that were 100% supportive, even in my weird little eccentricity when playing. Whereas in this episode, we see some more of Ray's negative attributes. We've seen repeatedly, and we're going to continue to see in the future, as I've said a handful of times by this point. I guess it's now become one of those things as I review each of these episodes that there's a Everybody Loves Raymond drinking game. Every time I bring up something that's going to be a constant throughout it, whether it be the whole dynamic between Robert and Amy, Marie being overbearing, Frank being Frank, Ray and Deborah going like this, or Ray and his man-childish eccentricities. Probably by the end of season 1, you'd be hammered out of your mind. By this season, you'd be dead. We'd be here for another reason. We have come to lay the fandom to rest, as it were. But anyway, get back on topic. Ray, we see a little bit of his things here, and part of it is his whole thing about how he loves sports, and seeing that Michael is out there doing weird stuff in the game, you can really see he's starting to get a little frustrated. Everyone else is enjoying themselves to certain degrees. Deborah's out there being a supportive parent watching her kids. Marie's, of course, being a supportive grandmother out there enjoying a time with her family. Frank is enjoying things as best he can. I mean, he has little comments here and there, but he's keeping them mostly to himself, and or only loud enough to where the family can hear him. And it's small stuff like, oh, look at Jesus, look at Geoffrey, he's skipping. Maybe he should curtsy, too. And making comments like that. That's essentially Frank's role throughout this whole episode. And of course, this leads to one of my favorite Frank one-liners, where he's saying something to Robert later when Robert's starting to have an upset stomach, and Robert's like, "Why do this? I find your discomfort amusing." It's a one-liner I brought out jokingly a couple times, so nice to remember which episode it comes from. Been a while. And I got just a little side note, this is another episode I saw the first time in syndication. Don't remember when exactly, but that's when it was. Robert's there being the supportive uncle. I mean, at one point when Allie gets bored, he takes her outside and then comes back in after the kids were messing with him, which, given how big he is, I'm like, how the hell did that manage? You'd think he'd be able to stop the seesaw thing with just his long legs, but maybe with how it's configured, he had to like set himself in the center and didn't have wasn't able to move his legs due to the way it's configured and the speed and all that until they let him stop. Just some food for thought. But Ray, he's out there basically making comments like, Jeff, like, Michael, you don't have to do that. You don't got to play defense. Your team has the ball. And there is one deleted scene for this, but it's mainly more of them at the baseball game. And I'll go back out of this thing. I'm actually... Hold on. Oh, never mind. Okay, now I remember. I got him in reverse order. It's Michael who's good, and it's Geoffrey who is poor at it, which, of course, if you all remember Frank's comments from before, you can see why. I don't know why it says Michael on that one, but now I remember that one. That deleted scene takes place later, so sorry. Just a little thing I meant to say. Just the twins, strike them, reverse them. But given how, other than some of those minor differences, the twins are essentially interchangeable, and I think both Sullivan and Sawyer had different times playing both twins. Just shows how interchangeable their characters are. So sorry about that, guys. But he's just doing so much stuff. I mean, even the little picture thing I'm looking at right here is from the scene where he's playing defense. And some of the other parents do chime in a little bit to try to make Geoffrey feel a little bit better. You know, like, Geoffrey, way to go, Geoffrey! And then after the game is when Brian comes and has his little comments. Now, Brian wanted to talk with Ray about the comments he makes, you understand. But it's the way he goes about it that really is a dick. Like, he's trying to talk with him. He stops talking for a second, then Ray tries to chime in. He's like, excuse me, I was still speaking. Me, I probably would have just looked at him if he had said that to me and then just went, all right. But it's the second time he does it when he had equally stopped and Ray's trying to talk with him. And he says, I was still speaking. That would have been the point where me, personally, I would have been like, conversation's over, then got up and walked away. Because we've seen how Brian was before. He was a dick. And here, he's still a dick. And I'll say Dan does play it beautifully. You still want to reach through that, grab him by his scrawny neck, and punch him upside his bald head. But that's intentional, because he's a dick character. Now, him talking to Ray about all this, you understand, because of some of the comments. It's the way he goes about it that it's like, what? Now, I get that Brian is trying to tell us that this game is supposed to be fun, hence the title. And they're trying to teach them good sportsmanship and all that, which, yeah, there's that. But it not all being all about winning, which I get why they're trying to instill that value in it, but at the end of the game, it is a sport. You're supposed to have that little bit of competitive edge to try to win, but you also want to temper that with, respect for your opponents, the opposite team. I mean, that's why we have that whole thing of 2, 4, 6, 8, who do we appreciate? I mean, even in the football and basketball rivalries, I mean, make fun of each other, but there is still that little bit of friendly rivalry competition thing. It's not like the olden days between countries where it's like, the English, the French. I don't know why the accent's backwards, but you get my point. But Brian seems to want to take it to the nth degree, where it's, as we saw with T-Ball, he still wants to carry that same mentality over here, where it's only about the fun and basically cut out the entire thing about that little bit of competitiveness, which just strikes the wrong thing about Brian. I know he wants to make sure the kids are hydrated, as we see later, but it's just like, he really shouldn't be the head coach. He really should be like a side coach or an assistant coach. Him being the main one just doesn't strike. Just strikes a little bit off with me. Maybe it's just the way Dan plays him. And he brings up one thing that Ray did say that we didn't get to hear him say. That he said, he's allergic to the basketball? That's not funny. Now, to the audience, it is. But if you actually heard someone yell that at their son during a basketball game, you'd be like, huh. It's the comments he says out loud right here that you can really see that Frank, raising Ray, did rub off on him a little bit. As we find out later, he would say comments to him like, bad haircut, I can still see your face. course, Ray said, yeah, I felt bad for a second, but then I got over it. It's like, until just now. This is one of those things that, like, that's just the way my dad is. And it's one of those things that, like, Ray, do you really want Geoffrey, and by extension the other two, to think that about you to a certain extent? Yeah, our dad just made comments like that, and have them be, like, negative ones. It'd be one thing if they were actually funny, or pick your spot. And this is one of those things that both Ray, and by extension Frank, and a little bit of Marie, lack something called situational awareness, where they have no filter when they say stuff. Marie likes to think she does, but what we see, she doesn't. She just changes the way she says it and goes into that passive-aggressive BS. That still is not situational awareness. Now, there might be situations where it's called for, but from what we see Marie, most of the time it's not. But Ray, with his comments here, sometimes around the guys they make sense, other times not. I mean, there's a reason why in one episode Marie straight up tells him, I think you're the only one that thinks you're funny. Because he lacks situational awareness or stuff like that. And that's the whole thing about him at the basketball game. Complete lack of situational awareness to the point where he hurts his son's feelings. Particularly with one comment where he says, I have one son that's good about playing basketball and the other one's good about twirling around and pretending to be Scooby-Doo. And Geoffrey heard him because he was standing behind him. Now, how much of the conversation he was listening to, we don't know. But we know for certain he heard that last part. And the thing that made me want to reach in inside and slap Brian was, with how they're sitting, Brian most likely saw Geoffrey. He could have been like, what? Try to give him signals. Now, of course, if he had tried that, there could have been a thing where Ray would have been like, excuse me, Brian, I'm still speaking. Throw that right back at him. Add another little bit of humor. But he didn't. And because of the comments, Geoffrey decides he's going to quit basketball. And he actually tells Deborah why. And you can imagine with how Deborah is, she gets on Ray's case and is going at him. Verbally, of course. You know, like, why would you say this to him? You said it in front of him. Which, of course, leads to that little exchange I mentioned earlier where he mentioned the thing his dad used to say to him. Now, Ray does say one thing to her when she's trying to get what he's going to say to him. It's like, I don't have to run things by you. You're not in charge here. Which technically is correct. Deborah is not in charge. As I've gone over this before, a marriage is a partnership. You're supposed to be equal. Now, her asking makes sense, but Ray going and saying she's not in charge is correct. But probably the wrong thing to say in that situation. And, of course, he quickly backstraps and says he's going to go and try to get Geoffrey to go, and he goes there. It doesn't really work, because at first Geoffrey does not want to go back, which leads to the next game where Geoffrey's up in the stands and he's fidgeting. You can tell he's bored. He wants something to do. And there's a lot of extended stuff on the deleted scene, which, but how it is, you can see why they cut that scene out, because all it is more moments of them there, Frank with the pillow, and just more comments from them. And it kind of would hurt the pacing, so I can see why they cut it out. It's nice to see on the DVD, though. Now, Geoffrey eventually wants back in the game, and Brian decides to let him in the game. And here, Geoffrey's having a lot more fun. He's still doing weird stuff, like he's doing his wing, where he's I think the other team has the ball, and he's running after him. He has his hands. I mean, I got the gym pants here, but I don't know if I want to do it. But I can use it as an analog, where he sticks his hands down the front of it, and they come out through there. And he's like running around like that. That's the moment that really sticks out to me, and the way Ray's looking at him like, oh my God, he's actually doing this. Now, Ray's trying to be supportive here. But this is the fun thing about this part of the episode, because he takes that energy we saw him in the stands where he's being slightly negative. In the first part of the episode here, he's being overly supportive. Embarrassingly overly supportive, which plays into the end of it. Is at the end of this game, at least the part we see, Geoffrey gets to make some free throws, and he makes them. And Ray's all like that, oh yeah, you got it. And Geoffrey eventually is like, shh, sorry. And then when he's asked straight up, that's your dad, Geoffrey's like, so Geoffrey has been embarrassed by Ray to the point where he's pulling a biblical reference and denying that that is his faja. Now, the epilogue for the episode, of course, is Ray pulling a Geoffrey with that thing with Deborah, and it's a nice little moment, and it's one of those things I watch, I'm like, oh, that's a nice way to end the episode. That's all I'm going to say about it. It's a nice little cute little thing. It shows that Ray can take some stuff to try to spice up the relationship with Deborah, and shows he is going to still be supportive. But we all know by the next episode the focus is around the kids. For the most part, the status quo is going to be reset. As is the thing with sitcoms, I'm thinking one day down the road, I'm just going to put this out here with this episode, of doing a video about sitcom tropes, what episodes they started with, and how well they have aged, and if they should be used, and which ones should be retired, and all that, and which ones actually still work. Which should be a fun little thing. I know in that one I'll probably be talking about I Love Lucy a lot, since a lot of the sitcom tropes and way that they are made started with that show, so that'd be fun. It'll be research heavy, but it will be fun. I don't know if it'll be like this, where I'm just sitting here in front of it with notes, or be a video essay. One video essay probably would roll a little bit better. So stay tuned for that. Now, only other trivia here is that during the game, Ray's real-life children make cameos, and one of them is actually seen near Geoffrey during the free throws. I wasn't paying attention there despite the notes, but it's one of those things where you throw them in there. Of course, it's Ray's daughter that's really going to get the big-ish role. I think starting either the end of this season or next season, where she's the daughter of Ray's next arch nemesis, Peggy. Oh no, that's really all there is to say about it. Lou, once again, great with writing, especially the character dynamics. It's Ray and Deborah of the adult Barones that have the most to do. The other ones are just there in the background, Robert just being in uncle mode, getting sick. Frank and Marie just being Frank and Marie, not really much to do other than comment on what they're seeing, and then just being grandpa and grandpa in the scenes. It's more about them reacting to the kids. And Sullivan and Sawyer do a good job playing Michael and Geoffrey in this one. Now, I don't know how much throughout the episode they go back and forth playing Geoffrey here, but they do a good job, especially whichever one is the primary one, because I have a feeling one of them is the primary one playing Geoffrey in this episode, and they really do a good job showing that he has that weird energy on the court, like that scene where he's running, all that. I can imagine they probably had a lot of weird ideas like that and told him, just go do what you want, make sure it's PG, and then just film the shots of Ray reacting to it. Well, that's what I'd like to think. This is an episode I wish there was a commentary for, just to hear some of Ray's comments on it. But alas, there isn't. And another good episode to watch, though. Definitely don't know if it'll be on the VHS list, but it's never on the skip list, as is the next one. It's going to be written by Tucker Colley, and this is another one I saw in syndication. Another relationship-related one, especially since it involves Deborah's parents. This one is going to be one that the whole syndication thing I am going to have some comments on, but mainly with the opener. The next episode, of course, is Older Women. Till next time, guys.